Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. As always, if you appreciate these or any videos I do, subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you so much for joining the ride. Back in 2017, we received one of the most unique Commander options ever, in the Arcane Wizardry Precon deck, which featured prominently a Nala Archmage Ritualist and the Eminence ability where you would benefit off of wizards entering the battlefield. We received another Commander option, also in Grixis colors, Mairsil the Pretender. However, this human wizard didn't really have much synergy with the deck outside of being a wizard himself. Instead, because you had limited support for this secondary commander, you would have to find cards elsewhere, and this is where this commander shined. Because you're not finding generic support for Mairsil, you're finding very obscure cards that you're never going to really see support any other commander option, unless Wizards of the Coast were to give us another Mairsil-like commander. But whenever Mairsil enters the battlefield, we get to exile an artifact or creature card from our hand or graveyard and put a cage counter on it. Mairsil the Pretender has all activated abilities of all cards you own in exile with cage counters on them. However, you may only activate each of those abilities only once each turn. So naturally, when you were looking to build around this commander in the very beginning, you would assume that the following cards would be the go-tos. Illusionist's Bracers to double your output, Gilded Lotus while it's not an optimal mana rock, it's something that can tap for 3 mana, and since Mairsil's ability didn't exclude mana abilities, you could tap him for that 3 mana. Arcanus the Omnipotent is another one. Very similarly, you tap to add 3, but this time instead of mana, you're drawing 3 cards. Also gains the ability to bounce himself back to your hand, which was really cool. And of course, Conjurer's Closet so that you could take advantage of the ETB instead of having to bounce him back and replay him again. This strategy also incorporated a lot of draw and discard that's looting, so cards like Faithless Looting, Tormenting Voice, Windfall, and even Ancient Excavation were all perfect cards for the strategy because you could just dump whatever you wanted that had an activated ability in your graveyard, since for our commander, our graveyard was just as good as the hand. But like I said earlier, where this commander shines is being able to take advantage of really obscure out there cards. Pack Rat, Quicksilver Elemental, Hate Flayer, Shaku Endbringer. While you could definitely see Pack Rat in a rat-focused strategy, it's really strongest in this deck where you can easily take advantage of it so that you can exile another card from your hand or your graveyard. Quicksilver Elemental might be a bit confusing if you've never played this deck before, because why would you put it in really anything else? If it gains the activated ability to gain all activated abilities of target creature until end of turn, how this would work is that you would use the ability on Mairsil, so that Mairsil would get basically all of its abilities again, meaning that if you're able to pay this blue over and over again, you could go infinite using things like Gilded Lotus, anything that can untap like Hate Flayer here, and then winning the game getting around our commander's restriction. Hate Flayer, of course, being one of many creatures that can untap itself, and because its real value is being something we can easily exile from our hand or our graveyard, you're not going to see this in really any other deck. Shaku Endbringer has a huge downside where during our upkeep we lose 3 life, and it can attack if there's another creature in play. We just care about activated abilities, which was the strength of Mairsil, meaning with cards like Shaku here, you could totally ignore everything above that activated ability. So you would remove target creature from the game and put a +1/+1 counter on Shaku, which is another thing I should probably explain. All of these creatures have an activated ability that directly involves the name of the original card. The official ruling is that since the activated ability is just talking about the card itself, you would just treat each name here like it's Mairsil the Pretender. And on top of that, this is one of the few commander options where you're actually looking to play very strange creatures like the Morphling and Morphling Offspring. So Torchling and Aetherling as well. We have another one we're going to talk about later, but especially with Morphling and Torchling, you have the abilities to untap themselves, which would then mean you could untap Mairsil. But more is more in this deck. The more abilities you have, the more options you have. You're basically over the course of the game building a super commander. And because those cards are going to remain in exile with cage counters on them, you can just keep playing Mairsil and he will continue to have all of those abilities on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th time you end up casting him. So let's talk about the support we've received since 2017 because it's been about 5 years. The following year, in 2018, we started getting some support for this, and this by no means is every single card that you could fit into a Mairsil deck, but these are some of the standouts. Like Final Parting, you can choose to search for the activated ability that you want. You could put one of them into the graveyard and the other one into your hand. Quicksilver Elemental being a pretty important way to win, you would probably want to put that into your hand and then something like a Gilded Lotus in your graveyard. Doom Whisperer is another way that we can easily fill our graveyard. You just pay 2 life to Surveil 2. Doom Whisperer has the upside of actually being a good creature when it's on the field. And Coveted Jewel is basically another Gilded Lotus. You don't see these cards in many other decks. But because we only care about the activated ability, you get to again ignore all the conditions. So your opponents aren't going to gain control of Mairsil because Mairsil would only have the ability of tapping to add 3 mana. 2019 gave us a little bit more support here. Thrill of Possibility, another loot card from Throne of Eldraine. Pendant of Prosperity is another one that, again, showcases the strength of this commander, where you can ignore all the downside. Pay 2 and tap to draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, and then its owner would do the same exact thing. Well, you are the owner, and like I said before, when a card will reference itself in the text of the activated ability, that will just mean Mairsil if Mairsil has the ability. Spark Double's a great card, and really making copies of Mairsil, if you can ignore the legend rule, is going to help you out significantly. And Endling would be the next Morphling that we could play, which released in Modern Horizons 1. 2020 we got Thassa Deep Dwelling from Theros Beyond Death, which is basically a better Conjurer's Closet if you can play it. Also has that activated ability where we can pay 4 mana and tap another target creature. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, again it's another clone where we can ignore the legend rule, get us another Mairsil, get another Mairsil trigger. Both Mairsils are going to have those abilities. Chromatic Orrery is actually pretty good with Mairsil because it is a 7 mana rock, does tap for 5 colorless mana. Bit of a downside though, because as I mentioned, you would ignore all downsides. You also ignore pretty much anything good that isn't an activated ability, but you also get the activated ability of paying 5, tapping it to draw a card for each color among permanents we control. 2021, I think we got probably the best support so far. Unmarked Grave and Auric Loremage are awesome ways that we can fill our graveyard with exactly what we want. Getting the activated ability from the Loremage is insane. Means our commander will basically be able to tutor every turn. Asmodeus the Archfiend, again, you can ignore that top condition, where instead of drawing, you exile the top card of your library, so that you can just pay 3 mana to draw 7 cards with 0 downside. Battle Mage's Bracers is basically another Illusionist's Bracers. This, of course, and a lot of other equipments you're not going to want to exile with Mairsil because it just wouldn't do anything. This one though is just a great equipment that was meant for commanders like Mairsil. And this year in 2022, we don't have a ton of new cards, but we have some standouts in the vehicle department, like Unlicensed Hearse. Giving Mairsil the ability to exile 2 cards from a single graveyard by tapping isn't anything to scoff at. Graveyard Hate is actually really underrated in Commander. Mirror Box is something you could consider if you're focusing on copying Mairsil and you want to keep those copies. And Goro Goro is probably the best new addition for Mairsil because that first ability is just 1 red to give all of your creatures haste. So if you have other good creatures with tap abilities in your deck, not only can you give Mairsil haste when he enters, but you can give them haste as well if you play them in the same turn. And oh yeah, if you happen to attack with a modified creature, you can pay 5 mana and get yourself a 5/5 flying dragon. And that's why I love Mairsil, because you're taking a lot of these weird cards that don't see a lot of commander play. So let me know what you think about Mairsil the Pretender in the comment section below. Again, subscribe if you have not, I really appreciate having you here. Commander Void here signing off, I will see you all next time.